Hey everybody, thanks for watching and thanks for taking the time to purchase and support, and welcome to Exodus. It's a lot of information we have to get into. One of the things I want you to understand about, the Bible, I'm always talking about understanding what it's really saying versus, just what we've been taught by the preachers. If you go by what the preachers teaches, we'll be lost, as most people are when it comes to the Bible. There's a lot more deeper things in these stories that we got to pay attention to, understand what it's really alluding to. And to also remember, as I said before, 1604 to 1611, the King James Version was written. So you got to remember, a lot of this stuff was put in there to give validity to and to basically foreshadow what we would be seeing in the future, from Adolf Hitler, from the Rothschilds, or what have you. We're gonna get into all that, and to really make that known and make that more easy for Masons and people who really understand the hidden meaning of the Bible to understand. When you put all this stuff together, and as we're going to break it down, you'll see what this stuff is talking about and what it really corresponds with. A little bit windy out here today, but this is going to be a really good series. This one right here, this book is so packed with a lot of hidden stuff that we're going to touch on. And I was going to, as I said, skip Leviticus and Numbers, but it's important that we get into those as well. So, let's begin. Let's get into this. So it's a super windy day today, but let's get into this whole thing. It's a lot we got to get into. And right off the bat, when we get into the Exodus story, remember, as I talked about at the end of Genesis, you have them basically coming into Kemet and them trying to basically establish that relationship in Kemet. So when we get into Exodus, what you're going to see is exactly them trying to place themselves in history. Now, what you have to understand, and as we'll go through in this book, is when it's talking about the Hebrews, I talked about this before, when it's talking about the Hebrew Israelites and everything they're doing, as we got into in Ancient History 1 and 2, it's talking about the Greeks themselves. And they're going to give you this whole Hebrews doing this and this story about the Israelites, but it's really talking about themselves. They're talking about the Greeks. And it's plain to see when you see it. So when we get into Exodus, now it's saying here, Exodus already starts off with them basically naming the descendants of Jacob, where, Jacob has been called Israel. So when it's talking about the children of Israel, it's talking about the descendants of Jacob, of course. So it says here, Exodus 1, start at 6 here. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So what is it saying? It's saying these people came into Egypt, and they multiplied. They gained in numbers. As I talked about in Genesis, they said it was going to go in and infiltrate. That's what we basically translated the word to them going into Kemet and infiltrate. It said, let us go in and infiltrate them. Let us basically go in there, confound their speech, and scatter them and all this and that. So we understand what it's talking about here. As I said, it's giving you them. So you had basically, as we know from history, the Greeks, the Romans coming into Kemet, learning, being taught by the Egyptians, growing in numbers. And it's saying here they growed and they multiplied and they became powerful and all this and that. So now it's talking about here, Exodus 1:8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So now, it's basically the Greeks talking about themselves. It's the reverse. It wasn't so much the Egyptians, of course, worrying about the Greeks and saying to the Greeks, get up out the land, you guys are growing too much in numbers, and we're worried about you. It was the powers that be understanding where the Egyptians were and how powerful they were. And the fact that the Egyptians did not have, aspirations of global domination. It was about spirituality. It wasn't about going out to use their knowledge and power to gain control of the world. And that's obviously something that the Greeks wanted to do. So them talking about, before they joined with their enemies, that's what happened with the Greeks. The Greeks was the one who joined. They were the ones who joined with the enemies of the Egyptians. They were the ones who basically let the Persians in the back door to come in and conquer and take over so they could eventually take over themselves. So it's basically them, as I said, using the Hebrews to give you their history, hiding behind the Hebrews. Because we know damn well that the Greeks in Kemet, they didn't know anything. They was taught everything. We know it wasn't no Hebrews in there. It wasn't no Jews in ancient Kemet going in there and being mighty and learning. Where's that information at? Where can we find any information in Kemet of them basically coming in there and growing mighty and growing in numbers? But I have shown you throughout my series about the Ionians, the Greeks, about how the Egyptians went in and helped them build the temple of Zeus and everything like that. And they was helping each other out. They learned so much from the ancient Egyptians. We know about this, as I said, and as it shows in the temple of Seti I and in the temple of Ramses III about there being Europeans in Kemet as citizens. We know they were the Greeks. We know. So we understand that they're basically flipping the story to make it seem as if, the Hebrews went through all this and that is talking about them when we know this is the Greek story. That's the whole reason why they know it, because they lived through it. And, when you do the etymology of a lot of these words, the etymology of a lot of these words is going to go back to Greek anyway. Plain and simple, we'll go through that. But we know it was the Greeks that was there and not the Hebrews. Again, since we know, and since the Romans told us and the Greeks as well have told us, they came into Kemet to learn. The Greeks, the history is there. Thales, Aristotle, everybody came in there to get this information from the ancient Egyptians. Again, the question goes back to when the Persians came in to conquer the Egyptian territory. Where were the Romans? Where were the Greeks? Where were the people that were supposed to come in and help the Egyptians that learned so much from them? Nobody came to Egypt's aid. Nobody came to help them out. It was part of the plan. It was a setup. And this is what's clear to see. So it's giving you the downfall of Kemet here in Exodus when you really begin to understand. That's what we'll go through. And again, these Hebrews are just the Greeks trying to make it seem as if, the Egyptians were deserving of being conquered. So, as we go on, it's a couple of things we got to address that, can get cleared up when you read in Exodus as far as the identity of the ancient Egyptians. So now when you read here, Exodus 1, 18 and 19, it says here in 18, and the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing and have saved the men, children alive? Remember, the Pharaoh was supposed to have ordered the midwives to basically go and kill all the men, children that were born and keep the women alive, but kill the men, children. Okay. So it says basically, why have you basically done this and kept the men, children alive? And the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore God dwelt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So now understand, we know 100% the ancient Egyptians was black. We understand this. We understand it was black. So you have the Europeans saying that they was white. You have Arabs saying that it was Arab, so on and so forth. Now it's easy to kill that nonsense. So these are the Jews that they say were enslaved by the ancient Egyptians. This is what they're supposed to look like, plain and simple. So these people were supposed to be enslaved in Kemet by the ancient Egyptians. So the whole thing is they look like white folks. And if the ancient Egyptians were supposed to be white folks and the Jews were supposed to look like this, how would Pharaoh be able to tell if they saved anybody alive as far as the men? How do you know if that's baby Hebrew or just a regular baby? It's easy to hide a child, giving you the whole conundrum of, well, wait a minute, Pharaoh just ordered the firstborn, or the men, I should say, in Kemet to be slaughtered. Kill all the men. But if they look alike, how can you tell? How can you tell who's a Hebrew and who's just a regular Egyptian? And it says here, Exodus chapter 2, it says, "And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she seen him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink." Now we understand this part. We know what's going on. It's supposed to be Moses, right? So understand, the Bible is different from the movie, but it's basically insinuating the exact same thing, especially when you take a look at it. So you have, this is the clip from the movie. Take a look.
And gold, of course. Then I can have any man.
Gold will never fill an empty heart.
Quiet, you chattering geese.
Oh, ma'am, that you're only happy when you're miserable.
You fools. Talk of empty hearts before the Pharaoh's daughter. What is there in her heart but the memory of a dead husband?
We meant no harm, Memnon.
Look, there's something here. Be sure it's not a crocodile.
Bithia could charm tears from a crocodile.
Ow!
What is it, Bithia? What did you find?
Only a drifting basket.
Shall we come and help you get it?
Memnon, send the girls away. I'd rather be alone now. Now see what you've done. Back to the palace, all of you. Go on, all of you. Musicians too.
Memnon, we wouldn't hurt Bithia.
Bithia's tired of you, and so am I. Off you go.
We're tired of everything.
Go on, off you go. Go on, hurry up. You've hurt her enough. What have you found?
The answer to my prayers.
You prayed for a basket?
No. I prayed for a son,
Your husband is in the house of the dead.
and he has asked the Nile god to bring me this beautiful boy.
Do you know the pattern of this cloth?
If my son is covered in it, it is a royal robe.
Royal. It is the Levite cloth of a Hebrew slave. This child was put upon the water to save its life from your father's edict.
I am the Pharaoh's daughter, and this is my son. He shall be reared in my house as the prince of the two lands.
Now it's clear as day that that baby looked just like her, white just like she is white. So how is it, if it wasn't for the cloth that she found inside, the basket, they wouldn't have been able to tell it that it's a Hebrew child. They look just alike. And just like in the movie, the same thing in the Bible, it says that Moses became a prince, meaning that he could blend in with the ancient Egyptians. Plain and simple. So it still goes back to the same question, like how would you know if they look alike? And in the Bible, it says that Moses became a prince, meaning he had to look like the Egyptians in order to blend in and for her to pass him off as her son. Same thing in the movie, look alike. So how is it you have the order that has been given to go and kill all the men? Think about it. Kill all the men that's born and leave the woman alive. How would you know? How would you be able to tell? Now it says, Exodus 1:9, it says here, "And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we." I mean, think about that. How? So if they are more and mightier than the Egyptians, how did they allow the Egyptians to basically put them into bondage if they're more and mightier? So you got to understand what it's saying here, who it's talking about. Now, when you read it and you understand it's the Greeks talking about the Egyptians. It's saying, hey, they are more and mightier than we. We have to basically do something to them. We have to go ahead and get rid of these Egyptians. When you understand the parable in Exodus, what it's saying. So we know, again, if you have the numbers, this is not, modern day where, we wear all different clothes. It's easy to tell who's who today. We're talking about thousands of years ago. First of all, one, if you have the Egyptians enslaving these Hebrews, I mean, they look alike, according to the book, according to the movie. But the Egyptians were. They barely wore anything. It would be very easy as a Hebrew to go ahead and snatch the garment or get a white cloth and put it over yourself and patch stuff off as an Egyptian. They look alike, according to the movie and the book. So how would it be hard? This argument still, it goes into the whole Hebrew Israelite argument as well. Them saying again that, the Hebrews that was enslaved in Kemet was black. And remember, this is one of their whole arguments of them hating the Egyptians, is them saying, well, you had black Egyptians enslave black Hebrews, other black people. But if they was black, how could you tell? If their numbers was more, doesn't make sense. Any way you slice it, it does not fit. Now, it's a reason why, as we'll get into. So I'm from Philly, out here in Vegas, and I walk around. I can't tell, one black person if they're from here in Vegas or if they're from Texas or they could be from Philly. We look the same to me. So, this is now, this day and age. So you're talking about, thousands of years ago. There's no way. There's no way you could tell. There's no way they would be able to look at the person and tell. So that whole situation should have been a lot more different. It shouldn't have been as if they was able to say, look, this guy's a Hebrew and, point the whole thing out and then, go attack. If that's the case and you're in a situation where they're killing all the freaking Hebrews, well, it's real easy to change if you look just like the people who doing the killing. It's crazy, but they can't say definitively that the Egyptians is black, because then we're the greatest civilization that ever lived. They can't say definitively that the Hebrews is black, because then we're the chosen people. We God's chosen people, everything like that. But they give us the movies showing them white. They give us the depictions showing them white. Hebrews white, the ancient Egyptians white. So it don't matter. The chosen people now, image of white people. Greatest civilization ever lived, image of white people. This is how they do it. Don't got to speak about it in the book. Just show the pictures, show the movies, and get people into the thinking that it's just a movie. But this is what they stamp. We've seen the whole thing with the Nefertiti bust and them basically saying this is what she looked like. So they can do stuff like this and give validity, because this is what they're doing. This is what this whole thing is about. Them giving validity to the Hebrews in some capacity. Them talking about them, saying that this is what happened, they existed. That's the whole reason why this whole thing is here, to just try to give validity to the people. But it gets much deeper than that. You got to understand that you had the Greeks create a people out of thin air. So they know eventually, at some point in their plan, in their agenda, they will have to create these people. These Israelites will have to come from somewhere. Now, as I talked about in Ancient History series and many other videos as well, we understand what happened during Hellenization and the whole wars of the Diadochi. Them basically going into those territories that was Egyptians. There were African people in there, Egyptians, black people. They had to go. Plain and simple. They had to get them out of Israel because Israel was a part of the plan. They had to go. So what you had was them indoctrinate those Africans, the people who was there, send them out teaching into other parts of Africa, what have you, which is why you have all this information out there and people talking about, you have, the Hebrews going back, hundreds of years to these Africans. This is what was going on. We know Hellenization was them spreading this doctrine, and they had Africans doing it as well. Once, the whole generational time passed and they had indoctrinated the children and had them passing it down. So that happened. You had finally, most of the Africans, the black people in Israel gone. What the Greeks did, they moved their people into Israel. Plain and simple. You might as well call them sacrifice. You know, they basically was sacrificing these people. When you understand in a second. But brought these people into Israel from Greece. This is what they do. We know when they come in to take over land, they bring their people. When they set up shop, game over. You know, and then when you go and you start looking at the history of the Jews in Greece, which we know the oldest Jewish synagogue is supposed to be in Delos in Greece. But we also have the Romanite Jews, who's supposed to have spread throughout Greece and other parts of Europe for over 2,000 years. They're supposed to existed for over 2,000 years. These Romanite Jews, you had them as well, you know, be indoctrinated and get this whole teaching about Judaism coming into Greece and going into other places as well. So then you had indoctrination, you had Hellenization go on, and you had then the Greeks basically go out into, you know, the so-called Middle East and bring back Arabs and bring them into Israel to basically mix in with the Greek people. And I talked about this. The reason why they look mixed is because they are. When you look at the Greeks today, look at what they look like. They look like Arabs. They look like Greeks. They look like a mix. They went out and indoctrinated these Arabs, brought them in to Greece to mix so they can create the Hebrew Israelites. Plain and simple. So that's basically what they did. They got the Arabs, brought them in, mixed them in with these Greeks. Plain and simple. Created this Hebrew, this Jewish race of people. They had to do it that way. Of course, they couldn't mix with black people, with the Africans, because we're dominant genes. We would show up and people would know, hey, the chosen people are black, so that's out the way. You can't just use Greeks because people would say, well, they're Greeks. Plain and simple. You can't, you know, put yourself in these Hebrew shoes because you're Greeks, not Hebrews. This is not a Hebrew story. It's a Greek story. That will be obvious. So, and we're going to talk about in Leviticus who the Arabs really are. But got the Arabs, brought them in, mixed them, and boom, you have the sacrifice. Because that's basically what they are. You know, these people were sacrificed, the sacrificial lamb, and this is basically they eat the whole lamb for Passover as a sacrifice, not realizing that they are the sacrifice themselves. And that's what Holocaust means. It means burnt offering or sacrifice. They were created to be sacrificed, plain and simple. So, you know, to give validity to these people, this is what they had to do. And, you know, these people was created to be sacrificed. And you have the real Jews, the ones who are really Greeks, as I've shown you guys. When you look at the ones that's in power, the ones with the beards, the reason why they have these beards to hide their real pale white faces, that's what they look like. Clear as day, you can see nothing but a white man with a beard. Plain and simple. That's all it is. They were sacrificed. Millions of people sacrificed so that they can give validity to these Jews and create a Jewish nation. Plain and simple. So when you go back and you understand when I was talking about the Romanite Jews, it says here, a majority of the Jewish population of Greece was killed in the Holocaust after Axis powers occupied Greece during World War II. They deported most of the Jews to Nazi concentration camps after the war. A majority of the survivors immigrated to Israel, the United States, and Western Europe, Today, there are still functioning Romanite synagogues in Chalix, which represents the oldest Jewish congregation on European ground, in Ionia, Athens, New York, and Israel. So there it is right there, plain and simple. Those people were allowed to be indoctrinated into, basically growing success just to be sacrificed. That was their whole purpose, to be sacrificed. So, when you look at it, it all makes sense. You could start putting it together at this point, because then you go back into Genesis. Remember, the grandfather, the originator of the Hebrew Israelites is who? Abraham. From where? Ur of the Chaldees, which is where? Mesopotamia, Iraq. See, now it all makes sense, and you understand why they did that. They had to make it as if the originator was from Iraq, because they knew they went out there to the Middle East, got those Arabs, brought them in to Israel and into Greece and let them mix. So now later on, people can say, well, they're not just Jews, not just Greeks, they mixed. Oh, they do have some Iraqi in them. They do have some Arab in them when you look at them. Giving validity to the Bible that Abraham must have been from Mesopotamia, because you have these Arab-looking, Greek-looking, mixed-looking people who are the so-called Hebrews. It's easy when you're paying attention when you look at it. So when you look at movies like Schindler's List, and these movies, just like the Exodus, is made to give these people sympathy, plain and simple, no matter which role you play in, whether they are the Jews looking white or the Nazis or what have you, it's the same, plain and simple. Now in Schindler's List, I mean, if you've seen the movie, it's shown in black and white, but you can't really tell these people apart if they wasn't dressed a certain way. They have on a Nazi uniform. The people who's doing all the killing and shooting, the so-called Nazis, look just like any one of those so-called Jews. I mean, Oskar Schindler with that nose looked more Jewish than some of the people who's supposed to be Jews in the movie. I mean, it's crazy. So that's why that was done. The only pop of color in that movie was when the little girl, was walking through town while they was raiding the town, and it was killing and, basically enslaving the Jews. I mean, even when you look at her, she looked like could be any little white girl from anywhere USA. Plain and simple. And they look the same. So it's tough to, give that argument any validation that how would you be able to tell who was Jews back then and who was an Egyptian, what have you, if, according to them, the Egyptians was white. It would have been a lot more easier for them to definitively say who was who, but they can't do that. And this is one of the reasons why. So the Romanite Jews and the Jews in Poland and the Jews in Germany and Greece or what have you, they was allowed to come together, to practice their religion, to basically flourish, all to be sacrificed later on, plain and simple. So I always think about that episode, was it Going to Germany? It's a Family Guy episode. It's funny as hell when you have Stewie go back in time with Brian to basically, save Mort. And they end up back in, World War II, the beginning of World War II, when the Nazis invaded Poland or what have you. So remember, in that little cartoon, it's just so funny. They're having a good time. They don't want to leave. And then they realize that, hey, the Nazis are invading. And what did Stewie do? Quickly toss that hat. He just tossed the yarmulke. And after he tossed it, he blended in with the Nazis. They didn't know he was a Jew. And it's giving you a hint there. Even Mort, who was a Jew, he was walking around with a little priest outfit on, and they couldn't tell he was Jewish until, he gave it away. And even when he put on a Nazi uniform, they couldn't tell he was Jewish. It's just little things like that that's giving you those hints, subtle little hints. Walking around clear as day, just blending in with the people. How can you tell? They look the same. And it's crazy when you really start to dig into this stuff, because the Bible is put to you in certain ways where things like this really don't cross a lot of people's mind. You're not really critically thinking when you have somebody expressing the book to you. And then when you try to read it yourself, it's like, a lot of stuff don't make sense. It's done that way to confuse you. But they're giving you their history, plain and simple. They're breaking it down, telling you what happened and what's going to happen. So now, just like we can ask that question, how could they tell them apart? You have to then be smart enough to look at it from the other side. And be, remember, this whole thing is a setup anyway. They know that the people look exactly like them. They know this stuff is, it's bullcrap. So the whole thing with, Nazis and the Germans, as I said, can't really tell them apart. You can't really tell them apart. You go into Germany and look at some of those so-called Jews back then, couldn't tell. They looked white. You just really couldn't tell who was who. So them knowing that, you have to understand, of course, they understood. We got to create these people. We got to have this Holocaust. We got to give validity to these Jews. We got to create this this Israel nation. So they already had a plan ahead of time. Now, many of you probably know about this, the whole book about IBM and the Holocaust. So you had basically in 1880, someone from the U.S. Census Bureau come up with an idea to create these little, electronic cards, so to speak, that would basically collect data on people, store people's data on these cards. So you had in 1910 this whole German licensing company called Die HOMAG, which is basically an acronym for a much longer German name. But they basically, came up with the system and everything. And you had in April 12, 1933, the German government and IBM basically create this system and, have it out there and have it ready. If you remember IBM, their first factory was built in Germany. So you had this German, at that time, the German Census Bureau basically go out and start documenting these people. Remember, Hitler was all about technology. It was no different. He was about that technology and understanding what was going on. But they, ahead of time, already thought about this and had already began cataloging and documenting these people as Jews. So when the whole attack happened, they already had documentation. They knew who was Jews. They knew who was who already. It was no escape. Now, remember, the rumors was going on. If you read anything about the Holocaust, many of the survivors, them talking about all the warnings, underground warnings and people secretly talking about get out of Poland, get out of Germany, what was going to happen, but nobody would heed the warning. So we know that was going on. But you had, all this information out there. They had collected data. When the raids was happening, they knew where to go. They knew who was who. You had situations where even if you was just a regular person, not practicing the Jewish faith, but your grandma or your great grandparents was Jews, and you was just regular. You wasn't a Jew, you wasn't a Christian, you was an atheist, you was whatever, but you wasn't a Jew going to synagogues and everything like that, or doing anything to where a person could recognize you as a Jew. But they already had documented your grandparents as being Jews, and those people, even though they walking around like what's going on, they were still caught up. They were still caught and thrown in the concentration camps because they was the bloodline of these Jewish people who had to be exterminated. It was basically a science experiment. They was a sacrifice. They was created to later be sacrificed, plain and simple. And we understand this. Even when you go back with 9/11, we know before they even build the Twin Towers, before they were even built, they knew they was going to blow them up. That was a part of the plan. We seen all of the old cartoons. We're talking about cartoons even before in the 50s, before the towers went up, talking about the towers falling, plain and simple. So they knew when they was building those towers, they were going to later knock them down. The same thing with these people. They knew that these people they let these people in and let them build the economy and do unbelievable great things and then knock them down, sacrifice them. Holocaust, sacrifice. Plain and simple. That's what it was. That's what happened. So you can get caught up in the Exodus story if you want. You got to understand what this stuff is really talking about. Now, y'all probably thought I was going to go into the book and start reading and talking about this bullshit. Come on. You can read the book. I don't got to read the book for you. You can read it yourself. All of this is giving you history and what happened and what was, to come. And when you start to understand why things are put in the book a certain way, it's not hard to make this stuff out. This is what it was about. Giving validity to these Hebrews, and that's all Exodus is doing. Giving validity, and as we're going to get into more, you'll see what else is in here. But plain and simple, these people were created to be sacrificed. I always said it before, a lot of people get caught up in the book. A lot of people get caught up in the story. And I understand it's just that. They put so much money, so many prominent people, billions, trillions of dollars, whole movie industry, books, everything. So much stuff behind this religion to give validity to it, to pound it home, to sell it. And it's the reason why a lot of people getting caught up. But, you got to understand, one, if in the 20th century, they use IBM, which is a technology company, computer company, if they had to use them to catalog and identify who was Jews, explain to me how they was able to do it, 15th century BCE. How was the Egyptians able to say, that's a Jew, that's a Jew, that's a Jew, so on and so forth? How was this done? Especially if they were supposed to look alike. If you go by, the Europeans' definition, the Egyptians was white and the Hebrews was white, or even the black Hebrew Israelites, the Egyptians was black, the Hebrews was black. Either one you want to go to. How were they able to know who was who? Now, I don't like to go for that whole stupid shit that the Hebrews talking about as far as, Africans look different than African Americans. So 2,000 years ago, before America was established and all this and that, how do we look? We don't know how we looked. We suggest we look the same. And I've been to Africa, and I tell you, some of the brothers there look just like me. So, again, how are they able to tell? So, again, of course, this whole thing, as I said, it's a story for you to get caught up in and lost in the fairy tale and everything like that. The Jedi mind trick, that's what it's about. Wave the hand, and now you just forgot your common sense. But when you start really getting into it, you see exactly what it's talking about and how history fits in when you start reading the book. So now we understand the whole Moses story. Don't really got to go into all that. Y'all seen the movie, y'all read it, y'all know about it. You know, he basically leaves or get cast out or what have you, comes back and tries to free his people and everything like that. We know eventually we get the 10 Commandments and all that. We're going to skip through the 10 Commandments. We're going to skip some of the stuff and just, get into the good stuff. But let's go ahead to Exodus 7. Now, Exodus chapter 7, it says here, "And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet." Think about that. "Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children of Israel out of his land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth my armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgment. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch forth my hand upon Egypt, and bring out the children of Israel from among them." First of all, why? Why? This is supposed to be God Almighty. Why do this? What is the point of this? And, this is like you as a parent going into your children's room and basically throwing their stuff everywhere, trashing their room, and basically, breaking all their toys just because they won't take out the trash. You telling them, go take out that trash. Every time they try to run out the room to take out the trash, you block the door. You won't let them out. But you keep screaming at them, take out the trash. You're destroying their room. Now you go and kill one of the kids. Leave his body there. The other kids are just in shock, but you still won't let them out to go take out the trash. You are their parents. All you got to do is say to them, "Hey, take out the trash." They're going to go do it. So in this aspect, you got to look at it. This is God. It's supposed to be God Almighty. Didn't he create everybody, everything? What is the point of this? What is the point of doing this? When you can just go straight to Pharaoh himself. "Hey, I created you. I'm a true God. I need you to let these people go." What's going on? Again, this is another instance where we see in the Bible this God being something different from what we have been taught God is, because it doesn't make sense for him to do something like this. This seems like overkill. So you have all the plagues, you have the flies, you have the locusts, you have the frogs, you have the bloody water, you have the firstborn, all these people dying, all this death, destruction, the magic and everything that's supposed to happen with Moses and all that. All of that happened, And remember, as God said, he's supposed to basically, trash Egypt. All that happened for what? All this death and destruction so that the Hebrews could leave. And the Egyptians would later still become a great and mighty nation who still never bowed down to the God of the Jews. Still never served that God. Still had their own traditions, their own everything. So what was the point of all that if the Egyptians was just going to later become stronger than the damn Hebrews? More powerful than ever, more remembered than ever to this day. What is the point? So when you go in and you read that whole thing, what God's supposed to be doing with the Egyptians, you look at real life. What happened? What happened? That's supposed to have happened. We can't find no proof of this. And, all this destruction we can't find no proof of that. But you look at the Egyptians, their legacy is stronger than anybody's. So what was the point of this? So now you would think if all this stuff actually happened with the Egyptians, that the dynasties would be worshiping the God, I should say, of the Hebrew Israelites. All that stuff that happened, there's no way, I don't care who you is, there's no way the people would have ignored, especially the family members of all, the people who had firstborns die. They would worship. I'm following the Jews if that happened. If I'm in Kemet and that happened, plagues and locusts and blood and everything, I'm following the Hebrews wherever they're going. Can I be a Hebrew? I'm trying to be down with y'all, but nothing. Egypt goes on to be great civilization, mighty, defends itself multiple times. Nothing. It was like, what's the purpose of that? What is the point when you pay attention to the story? So then what is the story really about? And it's, as I said, them trying to give validity to the Hebrews, plain and simple. And at the same time say, the Egyptians were evil, they were terrible, they did, demonic demon things, which is why they are synonymous now. A lot of people who don't know, who are not conscious, put them with, Satan. Oh, this must have been Satan's people, and the reason why, God had to get them out of there, whatever. It's bullshit, we know. But it's to give validity to them, to make the Egyptians look like they're evil and bad, and to basically keep people from Kemet. Plain and simple, because you read the Bible, you're not from that area. I mean, anybody in America is anywhere in any of these developed countries where a person could grow to power or, cause any problem, they don't go to Egypt, especially if you're Christian, which you have Christianity being the dominant religion right now, still close, but they're not going to Egypt to see this stuff. People think it's evil. It's bad. They don't go there. So all of this, and we all being, growing up and being indoctrinated and learning about the Bible. And early we have this story in the beginning. Stay away from Egypt. That's the message you get from the rip. Stay away from Egypt. Egypt is terrible. And that's basically, for the most part, nobody gave it a second thought. But that's what it's about. But the Greeks are basically saying in this book, which they wrote, of course, that, this is what happened. That, the Greeks was living with the ancient Egyptians. They stabbed them in the back, left their ass hanging, plain and simple. That's basically what happened. That's the story it's giving you. Just like in the Bible, how the Greeks get screwed, what the Moses partners see and all this and that, it's the same thing. And we know in real life, the Greeks stabbed the Egyptians in the back, screwed them, plain and simple. And, it's no other people. It's no other way you can get this story if you go rationally. Rationally, we can't find any proof, any validity to any Jews being in Kemet during this time. But we find all the proof in the world of the Hebrews being there and living with them and everything. The only people who could give you such a story would be the Hebrews, would be the Greeks, excuse me. The only people that can give you such a story would be the Greeks. We know the Hebrews was not living there. We know we can't find no proof. We find all the proof in the world of the Greeks. And that's a big deal when you being real critical and trying to put together the pieces. So they screwed them over to basically, take over the territory and to get their people together to basically go out and conquer any Egyptian and African territory that was in North Africa and any area going past Israel and Lebanon or what have you. So that's what it was about. So now when you read here, Exodus 23, it says, beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies and an adversary unto thine adversaries. So, who was the adversary of the Hebrews? When you think about it, what enemy did they have? Now, you would say the Egyptians. But, okay, that happened to the Egyptians and whole Exodus thing happened. So now you have the Hebrews who supposedly been in bondage for all these years and nobody know who these people is. They're coming out who are now their enemies. And you can keep saying the Egyptians or what have you, and they're going out to Israel, obviously, which another thing that doesn't fit. When they get to Israel, the Egyptians are still in power. So how are they going there? We're going to get into that. But they don't have any enemy outside the Egyptians, according to the Bible. So what is the point of them going into all these other people's land and taking it over? They're not their enemies. Goes on to say, 23, for my angel shall go before thee and bring thee into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. So it's painting this picture. You have the Greeks who basically got the most powerful information in the history of the world, you might as well say, whatever that is. We know a little bit of it, but it's more than we know, obviously. And now they're setting out to conquer the rest of these lands. And they're basically saying that, God, this is God's will. God is giving them this charge to go out and conquer these peoples, the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Hittites and all that. Going out to conquer these people for what? How is these people enemies of the Hebrews? So this is deep. You got to understand, as I talked about before, we know that these are just African territories, African people, lands that was ruled by the Egyptians and ruled by African people that they were just going into and conquering and taking over. And the Bible is giving validity to it by basically saying this was God's doing. But we know it was the Greeks. We know this was Hellenization. That's what really took place. Nobody else, nothing else fits but Hellenization. Now, I mean, I'm just keeping it real. At this point, we completely crushed Hebrew Israelite everything. If you follow my videos, we crushed it. It's just game over. This series is really going to just make it the worst. We killed every single Hebrew, everything so far. And this is just going to be the dagger going forward, because this is what these people are. It's bullshit. It's the Greeks. It's the Greeks. No Hebrew, it's the Greeks. Nothing Hebrew fits this. This is only fitting Greek people, plain and simple. Just like they want to sit there and say, well, the prophecy doesn't fit these Jews. It fits black people. True. But this does not fit nobody but the Greeks. Plain and simple. Nobody else could know. It's the Greeks only. So now it's saying here, Exodus 34:10. And he said, behold, I make a covenant. Before all thy people I will do marvels such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord, and it is a terrible thing that I will do with thee. Think about that. It's a terrible thing that I'm going to do with thee. Terrible thing. We're going to go out and we're going to slaughter kids and we're going to rape and pillage and do all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a terrible thing I will do. Observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I drive out people, thee, the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Take heed to thyself, lest thou come a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whether thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Think about that shit. The Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Come on. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice, and thou take of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters go a whoring after their gods, and make thy sons go whoring after their gods. Thou shalt make thee no molten gods. They're having a pool party behind me, so if you hear people cheering, it's a pool party out back. Sorry about that. But no molten gods. I mean, that can just go to anything. The sun is molten. We know that there's a lot of golden statues in Kemet, golden statues throughout. But the key part of this is just what the verse is saying, because this is exactly what happened. And it's saying the reason why we can't find any of these artifacts and anything that's pertaining to the civilizations of the African people and the ancient Egyptians and other territories is because it was destroyed. And they're telling you that's exactly what they did. They went out there and destroyed everything. All the images, everything was destroyed and covered up. We talked about the civilizations destroyed by the Europeans and covered up. So many things with that. We know how they came in and infiltrated so many other places throughout the world and basically took over. It's the same. Plain and simple. It's the same type of MO everywhere. When you start looking in history, they come in with the doctrine. They come in a peaceful, helping people. And it's a core group. Whoever this core group is the powers that be who are taking orders from somebody, and they are executing this plan. Plain and simple, because they come in with the same plan. Go in, be nice. Now, it's saying clearly, now because they wanted to make sure that they put that in there, because what they didn't want, of course, was the people going out and mixing in with these people. This is another one of the hints why we know it's talking about African people. Remember, as I said, they're trying to give validity to these, to make these Hebrews, to, you know, make these people exist. You don't want the women going out and having sex with these black folks having babies. Not at this point. It's forbidden by this people. So what I'm putting out here is for you to understand, as I talked about in Buddhism, is how you had these Aryans. You had these people go out and mix in all the civilizations. Every civilization they came in contact with, they was mixing in, except for African people. Think about that. Talked about how they go into, we're going to talk about this in Leviticus, in the next book, how they went into these territories and they just basically mixed in and, you know, not with the Africans for a reason. And this is the reason, because they knew what they were going to later be doing. This book is deeper than people realize, and everything is in there. It's right there. When you understand history, if you don't get real history, it's going to be tough to put this stuff together. You're just reading a book and you're reading a story, and it's like, you know, what the fuck? But when you know the history, you see what happened. We know it's talking about the Greeks and what they did and how they set out to take these lands for many different reasons. But the goal would eventually be to establish Israel as a nation, to basically do what it's doing today. So now, basically getting back into the story, you know, we understand Exodus, go out, and you have Moses basically going up to Mount Sinai, bringing down the law. Remember, they was worshiping the golden calf or the golden bull or what have you. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to come back to this part in Leviticus, because it's going to fit there. But we know you can go into the whole astrology part about, you know, Taurus, the bull, and everything like that, and Kemet as well, which we'll get into in Leviticus, and see what that's about, because it fits when you understand what was really going on there. But he came down and gave them the laws. And when you go through the rest of Exodus, which Exodus ends in chapter 40, but basically all it's really talking about is them establishing the laws, what the laws are going to be as far as what God wants the Hebrews to do. When, you know, you start going through them and seeing what it's talking about. So now it says here, just going to go back to chapter 30. It says here, when thou takest the sum of the children of Israel after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord, when thou numbereth them. Think about that. That there be no plague among them when thou numbereth them. This they shall give every one that passeth among them that are numbered half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary, and half shekel shall be the offering of the Lord. So here we go with offering. Every one that passeth among them that are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering unto the Lord. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel when they give an offering unto the Lord, to make an atonement for your souls. And thou shalt take the atonement money of the children of Israel, and shall appoint it for the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, that it may be a memorial unto the children of Israel before the Lord, to make an atonement for your souls. So what they basically doing is setting up the church, setting up tithing, you know, offering and everything. The whole Passover meal, all that stuff is getting set up as they basically wandering. You know, when you start to really understand, this is where they get in most of the things that you see in church from, right there in Exodus. And they setting up the laws. When we get into Leviticus, we'll see, I'm going to break down how they basically setting up what you have to do if you break those laws. But they setting up the church, they setting up the laws in Exodus. And it's, of course, more deeper things to that, as far as them setting up the rituals and what is really going to be used in the whole Jewish faith. So now one of the things I want you guys to understand is, though it may seem I'm skipping things from the Exodus story that a lot of people are familiar with, you got to understand now all that stuff takes place in Exodus. It takes place in Leviticus and Numbers as well. A lot of the things that we know, like the whole staff with the snake on it, everything like that, and people being bitten, a lot of that stuff is not all in Exodus. It's in Leviticus and Numbers or what have you. So don't think I'm skipping any of the the good parts. But a lot of the stuff is just obvious. Don't really got to get into everything. We can touch on, which we will, the Hebrew elders going up and seeing God and everything like that. Didn't really have to get into Jacob and Genesis and everything like that, seeing God face to face, which I did touch on. And it's a lot of stuff that we already went through. We don't really got to get into. The main thing I really want you to get from these books is what it's really saying, what it's really talking about, and how the history that we know has been basically, from the books. And I talked about Masonic Genesis, about Hitler being from the Rothschild family. It all fits. Now you see how it all fits when you go into Exodus and see how they basically created these Jews to be a sacrifice on a silver platter to the Rothschilds, Hitler. Whether you want to believe it or not, it all fits and makes sense anyway. You can't get any more validation than that. Plain and simple. I believe it 100% that he was a Rothschild and that was his job and he did his job. Even if he wasn't, then he was put in power by them. So any way you want to slice it, I don't think they would give somebody that kind of power that wasn't one of them. And remember, the dude never died. He's probably gone now, but you got to understand, he ain't died when he's supposed to have died. They would never let that happen. He completed his mission. The mission was to establish Israel as a nation. And a lot of people get that confused. You got people who think the Holocaust never happened, and which I don't understand this video. It happened. It's people who lived through it. It happened. But, the ones who did survive it were rewarded because the agenda was just so important that, they didn't care. After all, those people are, some of them were actually Greeks, real Greeks. And you had a lot of 100% bona fide Greeks who got caught up in that stuff as well. But it's the name of sacrifice. And this is what it's talking about. You can't really get caught up in the Exodus story. There's a lot of stuff in there that get you just caught up. Understanding that, plain and simple, all they're trying to do is establish validity for these people and try to put them in history as actually existing when we can see clearly what they did. Plain and simple. All they did was mix them up. And it's important to understand that. And they're not stupid. It blows people away when you look at it and you see Abraham being from being from Mesopotamia, Iraq. But it's not too many people making these connections that's doing this. I don't know if you heard anybody make this connection and show you, well, this is why they did that. Because they went ahead and mixed and created this Hebrew group, this Hebrew race, this people. And that's one of the things they fought for as well, with the whole nation of Israel coming together, for them to be established as a race of people, Hebrew. And you hear the Hebrew Israelites say it all the time. Hebrew is a race. The black Hebrews is a race. It's not just a name. All that was just signed into existence. So when people start talking about Bible prophecy and everything like that, this is man fulfilling their prophecy. Man fulfilling its agenda. The powers that be. Plain and simple. This is not nothing divine. This is something that they had in place. 1604, 1611 King James Bible. The plan was in there from the rip. Now, if you read it, and before World War II ever happened, if you read Exodus, and you can see it clear as day. You can see it clear as day. It's right there in the book the whole time. That's crazy. That's crazy. So imagine for the Bible believers back then reading it, but then now getting this whole information and knowledge about these Hebrew people who actually exist, who just went through a Holocaust. And now you read in the Bible and you're like, even though it don't fit them, but it's enough there to confuse people into believing that, that whole suffering and everything was the Holocaust and it was talking about them. So anybody who does any real reading and understand it clearly can see it fits only one people, which we'll get into when we get into Deuteronomy, and that's black people. And that's going to be deep when we get into that, because then we're going to be able to show King James when we get to Deuteronomy. That's going to be big. But for the Exodus story, not too much we need to really get into. This is what it's trying to tell you. And there were many companies, many corporations, many rich people who was in the know. Everybody, and this is one of the things you got to get. Everybody wanted to give money to Hitler. Everybody wanted to fund that cause because they knew once everything was done and was established, the friends who contributed and helped out with that whole thing was going to be taken care of. All that stuff was swept under the rug as far as the Americans' involvement with Hitler. And you hear stuff come out how the Bushes related and how the Wahlbergs and all these other rich families supposedly had donated to the whole Hitler fund and helped Hitler out and everything. Nothing. No charges, nothing. Plain and simple. But they went out and tracked down the Germans who was following orders. They tracked those people down like crazy because it gives validity to the story. They sacrifices, plain and simple. Even though they was patsies the whole time. All that stuff. I mean, you can't turn on cable without seeing something Hitler. You damn sure can't watch Family Guy without seeing it. It's everywhere. And now you know why. You understand. It's part of the same plan. Same people. America, it's the same thing. No different from the Nazis than America. It's the same thing. They funded the whole entire thing. It was behind it. Why do we give billions a year to the Hebrews, to Israel? Think about that. Billions, like 20, 30 billion a year to these people for what? And when you understand who's running things, where the power comes from, and how the Jews play in with the Romans, because who are they really? So now you get that connection. So, because we know that in Israel, it ain't no damn so-called Jews there. We know it's Greeks. We know it's white people. Plain and simple. So now you get that connection with them and the Romans. Plain and simple. While we funding Israel, by the Pope constantly coming to America, everything starts to fit, and you start to see what these people have effectively done. And it's deep. So now, again, this is why we went into the whole thing with the wall, in Israel, why you see so many celebrities, so many famous people, actors, musicians, what have you, go to the wall. Politicians, everybody goes to the wall. You get it now. It's because they understand who's in power. They understand who's controlling things and who's really running America. It's not a coincidence, as I showed you in the pictures, why you have all these presidents, celebrating Jewish holidays, remembering the Jewish holidays. And, we give so much money ever since Israel became a nation, billions of dollars going to Israel. It's right there in front of your face. All the people running the banks, the bankers, politicians, people in high-ranking positions, people in positions of power, Jews. It's not a coincidence, but you're going to keep seeing this stuff. And you see these people go to the wall because they know this is why they go, and they want to make sure that they are seen, and that the people who are in power, the powers that be, notice them going to the wall and paying their respect, them understanding who the real bosses is. So, again, it's just tough for a lot of people to put it together because they are so good at trying to show the world that, the consensus is we don't like the Jews. The Jews are bad, being a Jew is a bad thing. So it's funny how you have the Jews putting out that image. It makes sense. They are the ones who's putting that stuff out. They're the ones who run Hollywood. So why are they putting out this image of Jews being negative? So it's to cover up who they really are, especially with Family Guy and everything. You see that a lot, how they get bashed. And you have a lot of movies and so many different things where the Jews are being bashed for a reason. So that connection is clear, especially after you see a video like this and you get it down. So a lot of people get confused about that whole thing, who was really in power, who was running what. And we just simply understand how you had the Jewish power, which is really the Greeks, and the Roman power, which is Rome, the Pope, and why they, seem to go hand in hand. And then you see the Pope again with the Islamic leaders. They're a team. They're running the whole thing. And it's only a few countries left, a few places left that they don't have. And again, it's going to be up to the people to realize what's going on and to figure out if they want to stop it or not. So again, as long as they can keep confusing the people and keep us divided and separated and worried about entertainment and everything like that, which the Jews provide for us, then we'll never figure this stuff out. A lot of people don't want to figure it out. A lot of people don't want to know. You are a rare person, trust me, to want to gain this knowledge. A lot of people just don't want it. They want to just, go to sleep and think happy thoughts and just believe that everything is working the way it's supposed to be, everything is right with the world. People can't fathom this stuff. And, if America ever really came to terms to what's going on, I don't think they would believe it. It's easy to prove it, but I don't think they would want to listen. Too much other stuff in the way. But, everybody visits the wall. They pay their respects. And they want to be seen as saying that we understand who's really in power and who's in control and what's really going on. Plain and simple. So, they run in Hollywood. They run in the music industry, and they destroying our image. And it all fits with everything. I mean, all of it fits when you start paying attention and seeing what's been happening with African American people and who is really behind it in the long run. The same people that freaking destroyed everything from the rip, tracing it back. Slavery, Jews. Coming and destroying the African civilizations, the Jews, or the white people, the Greeks, who they really are. It all goes back. But we feeding the beast. We keeping the beast going. We feeding them. We continue to fund our oppressor and fund our oppression, and we're never going to switch positions at this rate. So this is a generational thing. We just happen to fall in a generation that's in a transition period that's going to be moving from where we're at now to a different state of power with them more in power and more control of our freedoms. Things are going to change. When this generation passes, the world's going to be completely different. And at the end of our lives, or of our generations, there's going to be a major change. And a lot of people, a lot of you, going to be born into that next generation of whatever it may be. And that's one of the reasons why I began doing what I do, to put this stuff out, to get people to understand what's really going on. Because it's real easy to be passive and just blow it off as, long as you live in your life and you're happy and you can go buy food and you can pay your bills and you can go on vacation. A lot of people don't give a shit. And it's not going to hurt you until it's hurting you in this life or the next. So it's good to know and to understand, to get this stuff, as I always say, into your consciousness, because it's going to be played out eventually. And you'll have that decision to make. But yeah, when you just go back and look, as I talked about, why these people going to the wall and what they doing. I mean, I keep talking about it because it's crazy when you look. As I said, if you go on Google pictures, celebrities going to the wall, you're going to see a lot of people going to that wall. Now you understand why. The Jews have always been in power, along with the Romans, and they running everything. It's deep. So what's alarming and what you got to look at is how they keep giving us this comparison of Hitler with Trump, as if something is coming, as if they're about to do something on that level, which, I don't see it, to tell you the truth. I have my own ideas and thoughts on what this stuff is about, which we'll get into. But, as far as Exodus, looking at the whole thing and just seeing, how all those pieces begin to fit, and how when you're going through it, you can just follow it straight through history, real history, as far as what the book is saying and how you can fit it in with Hitler and fit it in with history, world history, and what really took place. So now, history-wise, when you start doing your research, it's like Ring Around the Rosie. They keep playing this game. And the game is, give enough validity to the story until you can figure something else out. Because that's basically what they're doing. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, I was talking about how, I told people, if you're Christian or Hebrew or what have you, you shouldn't be following me. But, somebody sent me a video, and I want to just touch on one of the things that's out there that you've probably seen yourself, is how they're going out and they're, now finding a lot of old temples that was around during that time. And of course, they exist. It's so much buried under the sand in Kemet, Israel as well. And, during that whole travel over there to Israel. So many structures that existed that are old. They're finding old structures and trying to give validity to them as far as Bible, the Bible, King Solomon's temple and everything like that, supposed to have been found and everything like that. And you got to understand, one, with the whole King Solomon's temple, which we'll eventually get into, was never built. Supposedly had been built, and then the Romans built it again, and then now the third one is supposed to be built. And we understand the third one, when they start building that, is supposed to fulfill Bible prophecy, which once again, you can't prove the first two was ever built, and you're only building the third one so they can fulfill their agenda. So we know once we start seeing them talking about building, the third temple of Solomon, and it's actually going into construction and being built, they're about to do something. War is coming. But you got to pay attention and just know, again, you can be arrogant with this. They're not going to be able to show you anything. No artifact, nothing, no structure that's going to prove the validity of Genesis, Exodus, or what have you. Plain and simple. You have the Jews in Israel themselves admitting there's no evidence. Talked about the chariots and everything like that, how that was bogus. Whole Noah's Ark boat. Come on. This is what it is, people. I just gave you everything. I mean, there it is. And it's so easy to see when you understand and you just look at life right now. When you go to actual Israel and look at those people. Arabs mixed with Greeks. Plain and simple. That's all they are. So, again, you still have to look at it and understand what they're doing. Because then if we know that Abraham supposed to have the bloodline from Arabs from Mesopotamia, and that he came into Israel, which we know was taken over by the Greeks. We know the Greeks was in there. We know they mixed in. And we know when we look at these people, they don't look 100% Arab. They look like they mixed. So there you will have this mixed supposed bloodline of Christ. And then you go and look at the Rothschilds. Even still, you can look at these Hebrews, these Jews in Israel, and look at a lot of white people, and you can't really tell the difference. You can't tell, plain and simple. So they could be anybody, but everything that they're doing is to establish validity and to keep the argument going long enough for them to hatch out, their plan to fulfill their agenda. Plain and simple. That's all it is. Keep the argument going. Keep people talking about it. Keep us debating and fighting about it and arguing about it just long enough. It's all about distraction. Everything is a distraction. Just long enough for them to fulfill their agenda. It's not going to stop until they do. These people are frauds. Everybody know they're frauds. And when you pay attention and look behind the scenes, you can see who's controlling it. So again, when people talking about, Jews control this and Jews control that, no, it has always been the white man. It's always been these Romans and Greeks, the same people who was never defeated. Never. You think that the Arabs came in there and took Kemet from them? No, they gave it to them because they couldn't live there. They would die. They would burn to a crisp there. They all die of melanoma in a year. Plain and simple. They had to get out of there. Too many people was dropping like flies. And they were rather, as I said, their people, because they created them anyway, as we're going to get into Leviticus. Created these Arabs. Their people to come in there and take over and run it, rather than us. And that's all to it. That's all it is. So when we look at this stuff and you really start getting into it, I mean, again, when you read for yourself, don't get caught up in the story. Look at it and try to mix it in with actual history pertaining to the Greeks. So it's important to note that, nobody really defeated these Greeks or the Romans. Still in power, always have been in power. They established this whole nation of Israel to be the scapegoat to use to fulfill their agenda, which America, of course, along with England, is helping them out with that. And one of the things we got to look at and ask ourselves, as we're going to talk about in Leviticus, is how, why these nations, the stuff I just gave you, come on, they got to know it. These are the scholars, these are the people in power, got to be able to look at this Bible and see what it is. And the reason why they're not doing nothing about it is because they're part of it. That's what this whole New World Order thing is about. And at some point, they came together and put together a plan to basically screw us over. Plain and simple. So again, it has to be something. As I said, everything is about us. And it has to be something really unbelievable for all of them to sell us out like this. for this white man. So if you're trying to pass off the biggest scam, the biggest cover up in human history, the biggest theft in human history, you have to cover everything. And this was huge. We know it's deeper than them just, trying to get money and get rich. This was about power, control, and the fulfillment of this agenda. So slavery, as I talked about, was a must, because you had the rightful people of, what these Hebrews are trying to claim. Us being the original people, us being here before them, and us having all validity and all proof of our existence here before anybody else. Not to mention the claim to the ancient Egyptian empire and the people who built it, the people who was here and who established the dynasties and everything like that. So they know that was there. So again, when we look back through history and look at the people who put in the money and the time into slavery, we know it was the Jews. We know about the Catholic Church that goes hand in hand with these people and why they did this. Again, as I talked about before, us as a people remembering who we are, remembering the past, and them seeing so many different civilizations pop up with the knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. They had to get rid of them because they were a problem. They would give validity to the claim of the African people on this planet. So slavery happened, of course, and we know they were basically trying to get us from reincarnating with this information, with this knowledge. And that's what we kept doing. We kept coming back and kept, having children who was growing up and having these skills and talents and creating these things. And one of the biggest things that I always try to get people to understand is they didn't just take stupid Africans or they didn't just enslave stupid people. Even in the Americas, the people who was enslaved had talents. They had skills. They know how to do things. And as I talked about with the Moors DVD, how you had the people who had this knowledge was called Moors. The people who was already scientists and mathematicians and knew everything was already teaching. So they knew who to take. They knew who had this knowledge, and they knew that they would be the most dangerous people to be left, running around in Africa with this information of history, this knowledge or what have you, that would take away the claim of the Europeans as far as them inventing all these inventions and creating all these things and faulty history they wanted to create. So slavery happened. Once they got their hands on guns, that's basically what took place. They were able to then take over once they stopped fighting amongst themselves and, enslave us. And it's an important thing to understand, but it goes back, when you start tracing it all, we know it goes back to the Jews. And that's why they, again, from that time began establishing the cover up, and it took them a long time to get to this point. So now also what's important to understand is the whole establishment of America was not their plan. We understand about Washington being a Mason and, the Masons that was in, that were founding fathers. You need to understand that really was, what it was. And, they was basically breaking from King George III, and they was doing their own thing, and that had to be stopped. And I don't think that the majority of the founding fathers understood what the true purpose was for slavery. As I said, if they wanted to just make money, it was about just making money. Enslave the Native Americans. Why enslave Africans? Why bring all these Africans over here? What have you? Why not just enslave the so-called Native Americans? It wasn't about that. It was about coming here and stopping the Africans from establishing a civilization like they had in Africa on this continent, and flourishing and eventually challenging the history of this so-called, royal family and what they was trying to do. So as well, of course, they had to come to the Americas and everywhere else in the world where there would be an African king and challenge them if they were, trying to grow in power and trying to basically, really do trade globally. And that was the big thing. That's what they really couldn't have. As I talked about with the kingdoms in the Swahili coast, the Kerman Kingdom and everybody like that. All those kingdoms in Africa they were masters of world trade. They traded with everybody. And when you trade with everybody, you trade stories, you trade histories, artifacts, things like that. So that had to stop. Those ports had to be shut down, and they had to keep them from spreading the history and spreading the knowledge that they had, and then people taking it back to where they came from with the understanding that it came from the Africans and not from the Europeans. So again, it's just so much deeper than Exodus when you understand. When you start looking at the whole thing, it starts to give you the understanding of why things took place, because they were covering it up. Exodus is another cover-up, plain and simple. It's another cover-up. It's the cover-up, once they got their established kingdoms, and they had to really, to go forward with everything and keep the cover-up going, and above everything, the goal is to just get rid of anything African, anything that's going to trace back to the true people and our validity as far as who should be on top and their true history. So, just going to the royal family, as I talked about, with them being truly going back to the Jews and everything like that, really going back to the Greeks, all that stuff. Cover up. They got to keep it going, plain and simple. So the Rothschilds, basically, the reason why they fought America so hard was for that reason. They could not allow slavery to be abolished, plain and simple. To let the people go who has the claim to everything, who can really bust this thing wide open. If they could, to me, I think they would have kept us in chains, forever. But these people are smart. They created a system that they knew would keep us, basically in mental slavery and self-bondage. And that's what we are in. This whole hip-hop culture run by who? Jews. The entertainment industry, Jews. Movie industry, Jews, so on and so forth. And we all know this. So they created this system. Okay, let the people go. We got to create this system. Now, one of the questions you ask yourself is, why not, just say, fuck it, we enslaving these people. We the law, we the government, there's nothing y'all can do. They got to be enslaved. And not too many white people with, better eyes say, okay, well, keep them slaves. And above anything, they really have to keep the scam going, not just over black folks, but white folks as well, as I talked about before. Because then once white people start digging into this stuff, as they are doing now, it always goes back to that whole question. Who are they? Where they really come from? What is true spirituality? What is the true purpose here? What does it go back to? And they have already found that it goes back to Kemet, and many of them have put out books on true spirituality and how we are the only ones who can help them. Now, if you have these people digging into true spirituality and what this stuff really is about and what it goes back to, they would eventually, of course, get to ancient Kemet, which many of them have, and they will see exactly what happened. They will see exactly what I'm telling you, plain and simple. And they have to stop that. Because then, what you're going to have? You're going to have everybody saying, these are the true people, as you have white people saying that about the true Jews, believing in the Hebrews, because it all fits. It makes sense when you start to really pay attention. But it's deeper than that. So you got to have the movies. You got to make the movies that cast in, Egyptians as white, showing us in a negative light, destroying our image. All of this is to portray and to keep the whole perpetration of, the false history. Plain and simple. And to keep the original people at bay and to keep us lost in the sauce about who we really are and our true history. Plain and simple. And it all stems. You can go all the way back to a book, to the damn Bible, all the way back to this book and get all that just from Exodus, as we just did, because it's right here. And when you start going out of that book and you start breaking it down as to what is what, it's no other place it's going to lead you to. It's no other place. It leads you straight into this stuff. Plain and simple. And you start breaking it down. The whole thing with the Arabs and the Greeks, that's the easiest one to see right there. That's the biggest one. Because, there you have it with, as I said, Abraham being from Ur, and the way that the Greeks look, plain and simple. So you still have to look at them and say, okay, well, y'all come from Abraham. Abraham come from Ur. Abraham, if he's supposed to be a white dude, Ur is in Mesopotamia. Okay, who is his people? What they don't look, they don't look like that. They look Arab, but not just that. You take away, when you go that route, you take away the whole white power issue. You take that away and put it straight to, Arabs being before the so-called chosen people. So the reason why you can go to Israel and you can have these, the Jews live side by side with the Muslims, is because of that reason. They got to look at it and say, oh, well, the father of our race is one of you. It's an Arab. So we can't really spit on y'all like that. Even though you have the whole war, as I talked about in Genesis, with the whole Palestinians and the Jews. So at the same time, the reason why you keep having the Jews wanting to make peace is because of this reason. But the people who are controlling the Muslims have to keep it going. You can't let these people have peace. Plain and simple, they're going to figure this shit out. You got them have peace. You got to keep them separated. Even though they're together, you got to keep them separated in that space. The same thing they're doing with us, here in America. We try to have peace and we try to live together. What are they doing? They separating us. Race, fight. And, 10 years from now, we would have been able to say, well, everybody from that whole racist era, from the 50s, what have you, mostly all those people gone. 50s, 60s, Jim Crow, most of those people are going to be gone in the next 10, 20 years. They're going to be dead and gone. And we would hope we would have, an understanding race that's more united, everybody more together, more understanding about how stupid race is. But they're keeping it going because they have to. They got to keep that separation, but at the same time, keep us together because we're easier to control that way. And, if they could have a way, they would knock our numbers way down, make it easy for them to control. But, all this stuff fits, and it's deep how it all goes together when you start really paying attention to what this stuff is talking about. So basically, to recap, we understand what happened with the Hebrew Israelites coming out of Kemet, and that Kemet was supposed to be destroyed, which it wasn't. They still went on to be a great nation or what have you. And we understand that now the Hebrews are going on with Moses and Aaron out into the wilderness or what have you to follow them to the land of Israel. And along the way, they are getting basically the establishment of the faith and the laws of Moses, the laws of God. And then in the Leviticus, which is next, what they have to do if these laws are broken or what have you. So not so much really to dig into besides what we talked about in Exodus. Don't get caught up too much in the story. It's a bunch of bull mixed with a lot of hidden things. So we touched on it. We're really going to, as we go along in these books, come back to a lot of the other books, Exodus, Genesis, what have you, to touch on a few things, to make a lot of things make sense. But for the most part, this is what you need to know as far as esoterically what Exodus is talking about. So I want to thank you guys again for taking the time to support, purchase, watch, or what have you. And this is a good series. Trust me, you're going to get a lot of information out of this series, and it gets a lot deeper as we go. But there's a lot of things on the surface, you got to do away with and understand what the hidden meaning of these books are. So I want to thank you guys again. See you guys next video.